Shalom and welcome to Expanding Your Vision, our weekly podcast where we seek to live in the times of the scriptures and delve into what the scriptures are saying about what is going on in our environment, what's around us. And we're looking into and studying how the idea of that week's portion, which is of the books of Moses, first 5 books of the scriptures, how they're divided up. And where each Torah portion falls, there's activities and goings-on that are accounted there that is actually in some way affecting our lives, and we're going through, in some level, those same activities. And so out of that, we can see how it was written down and how these very seminal events were affected by those weeks in the past, and in that way see what's going on around us and how it brings us into the same situations at some level. And thereby understanding the way it's went in the past, we could see how it goes for us and how we could not swim against the stream, but swim with the stream and the energy that's flowing in that day. By knowing how it flowed in times past at this very moment, we'll see how it is in our moments. We are now at the portions kind of coming to the closing of the book of Vayikra, of Leviticus, and we are in chapters 16 through 18. This is Acharei Mot, after the death. It is chapter 16 verse 1 of Leviticus through chapter 18 verse 30. But as has been the case in coming forward in the coming weeks also, there's a few in a series of double portions that 2 portions are connected. And so we would say very amazingly, appropriately, Acherei Mot, after the death, is connected to Parashah 30, Kedoshim, and seeing how the Lord is connecting through the books, how they're laid out after the death of Aaron's sons, but after the death, taking a very overarching plan to see that leads to Kedoshim, the holy people, and paves the way for the holy people. The Kedoshim is the 30th portion of the 54 portion cycle. And we have chapters 19, verse 1 through chapter 20, verse 27. And the Haftarah leading into Ezekiel's work in chapter 20, and then touching several of the Gospels in Galatians and the book of Jacob and Kefa, James and Peter as they're called in English, from the Brit Hadashah. And another issue of living in the times, we're in one of the major ones, because one of the overarching ones, and it's even accounted for here, is counting the Jubilees. And that is done over a 50-year period. Well, it's kind of hard to get your training when it's spread out over 50 years. So we have these rehearsals that have more immediate manifestations in our lives, and we rehearse this every year. And it's the counting of the omer, the measurement of barley that's the first fruits of the harvest in the spring. And that trains us how to count 7 sevens of Sabbaths and 50 days. Because we want to count 50 days and we want to count 7 Sabbaths. And that is part of the admonition in the scriptures as one of that. So in the counting, as we've talked about, there are 2 of the larger strategies and approaches to counting, and we are perceiving both of those. We're participating in both of those. Some people will do one, some will do the other. So some people started counting on April 2nd of 2026, so this would lead them to being the 7th day, or 2 weeks and 3 days of the counting of the Omer. And there's also the counting that started on April 5th, which would leave us being the 15th day today, or 2 weeks and 1 day of the counting of the Omer.
Right, and for those that started counting, once again, on this, April the 2nd, once again, it's day 17,
yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And then so the Psalms that you would read is Psalms 119, 129 through 136. And for those that started the second count, would be day 15, and the psalm that you would read today. Each day has its own psalm, but Psalms 119, 113 through 120.
Yeah. So in each, again, it's part of that idea that each of these days has a certain energy and a direction and a guide. And by enacting some of these scriptures, we get also some other clarification. So that's why each day of the 50-day count or the 7-week count, there's a focus that helps us, and even that is broken up into several sections along the way in groupings. And there's a certain focus that participates in that
Right.
can help us, give us guides in our life based on what's happened in the past.
And once again, and you'll hear me, you've heard me say this several times in the past,
Yeah.
and you're going to say it today, and we'll say it in the future, is that this counting it's for a purpose,
Yeah.
but at the end of it, we're going to come to Shavuot, and which is a rehearsal or a remembrance of the giving of the Torah in approximately 1,500 years later, on the same date, the anniversary of the giving of the Torah. They're in Acts 2, they're in the temple area, and with many people from many nations,
Yeah.
and that's when the day that they received the Ruach HaKodesh. And so there's gonna, so we are praying for a greater revelation of the Word, as well as a fresh outpouring of the Ruach HaKodesh. With that said, what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And if the measure that you put in is the measure you're going to get out. So if you put in little, then you're going to get little. So let's go for it. Let's
Yes.
go for it. Let's go for the big stuff.
Because the year that we read about in Acts, they were all in. That's where they were camped out. They were all in unity and just completely dedicated to this moment at the fullness of the counting.
Right, and then keep in mind that, this is a pilgrimage feast,
Yeah.
and there are millions of people that
Yes.
shows up.
Yeah.
And so, but I think, when you were talking about that, I think that there was an excitement and anticipation of the 12 disciples.
Yes.
It was 11 whenever
Right.
Yeshua gave that to go to Jerusalem and wait, listen to this, for the promise of the Father.
Yeah.
And so what is he talking about there? He's talking about Joel 2, which was promised. And there was another place in Ezekiel. Those two places he was referring to the promise of the Father. They knew what the promise of the Father was,
Right.
and they knew that this day was coming.
Right.
And I believe that, the 11, and then later on in chapter 1, they get a 12th disciple. I believe that they are hopping, skipping, and jumping to Jerusalem because they knew something big was coming.
Right.
If they were there in the flesh for meeting up with the Messiah in their day, something that they had prayed for years, their ancestors had prayed for, and now in this moment it manifested. And so if that manifested what Yeshua was telling them, the promise of the Father, they knew it.
Right.
And they knew it was going to be big.
Right.
And I think that they tried to spread that to as many people as possible.
Right. And the promise that he would pour out his Spirit.
Right.
I think, and it made sense. They began to understand these things because in this period after Yeshua's crucifixion and resurrection, it says they started to remember things looking back that he had said that they didn't pay attention to. It didn't grip them. They didn't get the full meaning, however it was. But it's having light bulb moments are happening now.
Right. I mean,
They're really seeing.
from Matthew 16 till whenever the crucifixion happened, and even after that, he had told them already 3 times about his death and his resurrection. And they just weren't, he even told Peter, "You're going to deny me." And even when he comes face to face with that moment, it just blindsides him. And so, but once again, they started. So if the fruition of Messiah coming happened and they were there, then they knew that they could stand on that promise that it's coming.
Yes.
And they knew exactly
Right.
what it was by him just saying the promise of the Father.
Yeah.
They knew exactly what it was.
Yeah. They understood about looking back at what the prophet had said. Right. In these key words. And that's a strategy, a long strategy, a long used, however you want to say it, but to look at something, and when something has familiarity to it, it's meant to be familiar. It's
right.
meant to be a callback to something else. Words are carefully chosen, not just for their immediate use, but especially when you're trying to compile a book of resources that already has a lot of information. You can't always take time and space and to list everything that was spoken of before. So key phrases are there for a reason. So we look in this week's portion, we see in Luke 2, when the time came for the purification rites required by the law of Moses. So that has a key focus back to Leviticus 12.
Which was in last week's Torah portion.
Right,
Once again, we do these on Sundays, and then the week coming up, then we're into it more. And then, so we wanted to go back and share, because I really think this is important for us to examine.
Yeah, this was in the last Torah, the last double portion.
Right.
That's right. So in Leviticus 12, in verse 6, is talking about the woman who gives seed or conceives and brings forth a son. When the days of her purification are over, and now it's more generally speaking, because it's also spoken of a daughter at this point, but now it's concluding, it says, whether for a son or for a daughter, she is to bring a lamb in its first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or dove for a sin offering to the entrance of the tent of meeting, to the Kohen, to the priest.
And I don't know, I'm not sure what Torah portion is in, and it could have been in last week's Torah portion, but for a boy, it's 40 days. Right. And for a girl, it's 80. Right. So I think we might have touched on that a little bit. Right. So we're looking at, so after the days of purification, so how many days is that?
So it's going to be the 40,
the 40
or the 80.
Right.
So, and again, it says whether it is for a daughter or for a son. So whatever it is, if it's the 40 or the 80, here's something that applies to both coming up. There's an offering that needs to be brought. But again, when that offering is brought depended upon if it was in fact a male child or a female child.
Right, right.
And so that determines how things proceed. Right. But once you get to that mark of the child, then this offering is to be brought. Yeah.
But before that, so my question, and what put us on the search, was that phrase says, after the days of her purification. Right. So that little phrase, there's so much of a story that's packed in there that unless you have studied the Tanakh or the Old Testament, then you don't know the whole story. Right. You don't know what all was involved. Right. First of all, my question was, where were they for these 40 days? They were still in Bethlehem because she's unclean and can't be moved. It doesn't mean that she had sin. It was just meant that she's unclean. She can't go to the temple.
In the community,
she can't interact.
Go to the temple.
And then we know the Jewish custom is what happens on the 8th day.
Circumcision.
And so they're in Bethlehem, and so probably sometimes things are done at home, and it probably was done at home.
Right.
But because she couldn't get out. And so we know that, of course, the angel had already told her in Joseph what the name of the son was going to be. Right. But in Jewish culture, they don't actually name the son or proclaim what the name is until the circumcision.
Right.
Okay? So then there's another period of time. So this is all in that phrase.
All in that phrase.
After the days of her
Right.
purification. We're
Right.
kind of giving you a segment of what happened in those days that people aren't aware of.
Right.
And so what happens, it's either on the 30th or the 31st day.
Well, because when you read this, Luke 2:21 is just on, it was the 8th day, and it was the circumcision of the male child. So, and then the next verse is 22, and the time came from her purification. So the time of that was over. Well, so we know it's 40 days later, because it was a male child.
Yeah. I mean, after the 8th, there's 32 more days.
So now there's 32 more days later.
Yeah.
So Joseph and Miriam took him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, as is written in the word, and the word of the Lord. Every firstborn male is to be consecrated to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice in keeping with what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of doves or young pigeons. So again, we know that now it's okay for her to move, so they haven't left Bethlehem in all this
They
time.
haven't left. And so, but something
Yeah.
else happened on the 30th or 31st day. And it was something that Joseph would have had to do.
Oh, he would have to bring the
The
law of redemption for the firstborn
on that day. So he would have traveled to Jerusalem by
by
himself, because Mary's still unclean
Right.
at this point, and baby Yeshua would not have gone with him because she needed to nurse him.
Right. He'd stay with his mother.
So once again, we have within this days of purification, we have them still in Bethlehem.
Right.
We have the circumcision on the 8th day, and on the 30 or 31st day, we have Joseph, because Bethlehem is really not that far from Jerusalem.
Right.
So we have Joseph going to Jerusalem according to what the Torah tells him to do. So that's the one thing of it is, not only did Yeshua have to be obedient to all of the Torah, but his parents had to be.
Right.
And so they would have fulfilled all of these things. So then on the 40th day, and that's, so from verse 21 to verse 22 is about a 32-day period.
Right. Because in that are those things that happened, and Joseph left and all that.
Right.
So it reads very quickly. It seems like it just went from he's born, he's circumcised, and then they brought the offering. And it just doesn't work like that. But it's revealed back in Leviticus 12, where you see the time frame that has to pass in order to make this valid. So the other aspect to bring out is, initially, as we were reading in earlier, it's the issue of what's brought is the lamb and the young pigeon or dove. But if by means they don't have the means, they can bring less. So if they can't afford the lamb and the pigeon or dove, which understanding is that it generally wasn't an exceptionally high amount, but if they didn't have that, they could bring 2 doves, because to afford that. And so we can see they have very meager means to support themselves. Certainly no means to take a long trip to Egypt that they're about to be told to take. But fortunately, the Magi had brought,
Or was going to bring, because at this point, they
because
hadn't
they're not
showed
leaving
up.
for Egypt yet, so the
Yeah.
admonition to take them out of the country isn't there yet.
So a lot of times,
But you can see they don't have the money for
the
that.
wise men was not at the manger.
They were not at the main, right. It also makes it seem like they had but they couldn't have been, because they would have had to bring more than 2 pigeons. If they had had this sudden wealth infused into their situation, and they brought 2 pairs, or the pair of doves or 2 young pigeons, no, it wouldn't do it. It would have been an invalid thing, and that would have tainted his reality.
Right.
So the fact that they bring these 2 young pigeons shows also that the Magi were not there at the toddler in the swaddling clothes, or the baby in the swaddling clothes. So again, it's an insight into their abilities to do things and what their finances were. It's not just extraneous information, but it shows the progression of where they're at and how we can discern the time frames and some things that aren't mentioned, such as the redemption of the firstborn being paid. We know that had to happen, and
Right.
Joseph would have had to leave them and go handle that on his behalf at the temple.
But once again, I mean, they had to do everything that was in the Torah.
Yes.
And so a lot of times we think, well, we don't really hear much about Yeshua and his growing up,
Right.
from about this time until the incident at the temple when he was probably 12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't know what all happens, but we can know because primarily the Jewish people still hold to certain traditions. So you know exactly at 3 or 5, I can't remember which, then they would have started teaching Yeshua to read from the book of Leviticus. And so you can follow along in the Jewish life and you can know what Yeshua was doing.
Right. And they say similarly, after that moment when he's 12 and they can't find him, when they go up to Jerusalem for the feast, and there's decade and a half where we say, well, they don't know what happened. But again, there's revelation in the scriptures that can help us discern what his life was like in some ways.
Because they have, and I just want to say that we do have so much that we owe the Jewish people, because they've given us the word, they've preserved the word, the Torah, and they've given us so much, and primarily they've given us our Messiah, and they've given us all this technology, and everybody who is, maybe a little bit anti-Semitic. I mean, it's really kind of interesting that, if we could go into their house and undo everything that Israel has provided for us, they might be left probably maybe without a phone, maybe without email. I mean, we owe them a lot in the medical field, in the technology field, and they're just, and I don't remember now, but per capita, Israel has won more Nobel Prizes than any other country. And so you would be surprised at what you have in your home that Israel, and there's been like machines to help people, and then at the same time we're, what do you call it, biting the hand that's feeding you?
Right.
I will bless those that bless you. Okay, so that's enough of that. So
it says, I will bless those that bless you. So, the benefits that have come out through it, that the Lord has chosen to push through Israel, has touched the world in all its corners. So we certainly wouldn't have any of what we're discussing here had it not been for that situation. So again, we can see these kind of key phrases and milk it a little bit and see that it really does produce. So we can see the necessity of the Magi bringing these gifts, not just that they're honoring that, but they needed it because they never would have been able to facilitate what the word of the Lord was to them, to take him out and to move him to Egypt until such time as the king is passed and it would be safe because he's having all the boys put to death.
Right. And
so
much like Moshe in his day, so
Very much.
so we can kind of see how the enemy has tried to come in and dismantle some prime characters that Hashem wanted to use in this plan of salvation.
Right. He doesn't like the deliverers.
He does not.
The enemy does not want people delivered. So again, seeing some of these ideas and looking at the ideas, because as you go through the book of Leviticus, and the reason it's the book that children are started on to learn to read, is because it's the main book that teaches holiness. Like even this chapter here, where we talk about the chapters called Kedoshim, the holy ones, it is, this is the place where you learn what holiness is. It's not an abstract idea. There's things that make one holy, and one of the core foundational ideas of that is simply the fact that it's set apart. Whatever is holy, especially in terms of the context of the kingdom of heaven, it's the idea that they're set apart for the king's use. So, but they're set apart, and that's what makes it holy. It's not just an abstract idea where we have to impose certain things. It's first things is it's separate from everything else. It's treated differently than everything else. And so we have that, even like with the Shabbat, it's a day of separateness from the other days. And we could get into better, and this is better, and that's lesser, but the idea is it's separate, and it's trying to be separate, especially in the case of that, because it's a taste of the world to come. And he's carved out a little piece. We can't have the full inheritance yet. The exile that's in place, the frailty, the things that haven't been fixed. So there's penalties for what's happened before, the transgression and rebellion that's gone on. But even in the midst of that, he is going to carve out something. He has set aside a time and space that we can actually participate in the world to come. Even though it's not time for it to be here in its fullness and all the time, we can participate in it.
We can, even, like, whenever we have Erev Shabbat and we open it up with the blessings, and then we light our candles, and the cup that we use, that cup that we use is only used for the Kiddush. And we don't use that. That's not an ordinary vessel. That is holy, and it's set apart. So we don't use holy things for just every day. The candle, my candle holders, that's just used for that purpose. And it's just like we were talking earlier that, the word says to be holy before I am holy. And so sometimes that holiness seems so unattainable. I mean, because how can we be good enough to be holy? How can we, as soon as we think that we've perfected things, then we found out that we really didn't, and so how can you obtain that? Well, it's simply just setting yourself apart for his use, and setting yourself apart from the world's culture, and setting your part, to dress properly and to dress modestly. Those are things that you can set yourself apart. So it's really not about obtaining a level of whatever. It's are you setting yourself apart for him to do whatever he wants to do in your life, and how he wants to use you.
I mean, and it's the importance is we're dealing with a being who is holy, who is separate, he's above time and space. He's not below the sun in that way in his core that he's affected by it. But he's made these ways that we might interact with him, even though we're in the common. We are of common use, which is kind of the opposite of holy, is common. So in that, he's provided these ways for us to attain this level of holiness that we can interact with him. And it's easy to kind of forget about those sort of, these are safety rails in a way, to safeguards that help us interact with him in a safe manner because of our status and his status. We come to this area of, in the book here, and and even centuries later than Leviticus in this period, But Shaul warns the people who are taking things of holy stature in a common way. They're treating it more commonly. There are some sick and some have died among you. And here in this section we read about the issue of just blood. But in some ways it's very much the same thing. Some are sick and some have died because they haven't taken these admonitions to be holy as he is holy seriously enough. It says, also tell them when someone from the community of Israel, one of the foreigners living with you, so everybody there is either of the community of Israel or a foreigner living with them. That's all people. That includes everybody. There's no one else who is not in those two categories. So when they offer a burnt offering or a sacrifice without bringing it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to sacrifice it to Hashem, that person is to be cut off from his people. So a serious penalty for a situation. So when someone from the community of Israel or one of the foreigners living with you eats any kind of blood, the Lord will set himself against that person who eats blood and cut them off from their people. For the life of a creature is in the blood, and he is given to us on the altar to make atonement for ourselves. It is the blood that makes atonement because it is life. And this is why the Lord tells the people of Israel, none of you is to eat blood, nor is any foreigner living with you to eat blood. So again, a serious admonition here, and it's because we are to be holy as he is holy. We're not supposed to bring the common and try to make it interact with his presence. And some of it is not like definitely a decision. It's just that this is the way this is. It's a grace that he's telling us these don't go together, and because they don't go together, it will kill you.
Right.
And people, for the most part, are looking at things like this, and they don't realize the long-term issues of this. And even if you want to go, this is old and this is new, well, the issue of Shaul warning people is long after the ascension of Yeshua. And he's admonishing these people, perhaps not on a salvation issue, but on a how long are you going to be on the earth issue, or how long are you going to be comfortable on the earth. Some of them are sick. And he's probably talking about an illness that takes him out of commission. It's not comfortable. And whether it be a week or a few days, it's still probably very debilitating and not comfortable.
Right.
And some have died because of this lack of respect for holy versus common.
Right, yeah. And so kind of that brings me to mention also the month of ER once again, and so the month of ER is a time where they're in the wilderness, of course, and this is the only month you have the counting of the Omer that's partially in Nisan, and it finishes up in the month of Sivan, but in the middle is the month of ER, and so it's a month that's totally being counted. Right. All right, so that's kind of sets that apart. And as you were talking about the being sick and all of that, well, this is the month of healing, and we mentioned that last week. And so this is the month of healing, and so we encourage you to once again reach up and pull it down. It's I heard this story a long time ago that a guy went up to heaven. It was in a dream, and he went up to heaven and walked into this room and had all of these legs and arms and all of these body parts and stuff, and says, well, what is this? And the angel said, these are parts that are waiting for people to ask to be healed. And so whenever I say pulled down from heaven, I mean, it's all up there, and it's in, as Scott said, I think last week, as it is in heaven, on earth as it is in heaven.
Yes.
And so I'm not saying that we're all going to walk in healing. I mean, some people, because it's all for a purpose. Right. But I mean, I would certainly ask. I mean, you have not because you ask not. Right. And so, so we want to kind of think about that during this month and keep that. Right. Find scriptures of healing. Not just body, but body, mind, soul, spirit, finances even. And so this is a time that it's easily accessible
Yes.
to us. And so then also, just remember that as we see nature coming alive, it's coming alive, and all winter long, it's been, kind of held down. But this is the month, this is the time to spring forth.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's my encouragement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. May it go well for you. Thank you for joining us. Shalom.